Maybe just tell us a little bit what you feel comfortable about yourself, and maybe where you're survivor. Go ahead and advocate. What that means to you, and just kind of start from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was very grateful to be asked to talk to you all. I don't know if anyone, I'm sure most people on this community forum are aware of what's kind of been going on lately, but I had shared a post about some just kind of ethical victim advocacy concerns I had. To give you a little background, my name is Angela. I am a licensed clinician, and I am also a victim service practitioner. I have been working in the victim advocacy, law enforcement, and court sphere for over a decade now, and have a lot of experience working directly with victims of homicide, families of victims, victims of various crimes, violence, sexual assault, and working with investigators working on criminal investigations. So definitely very relevant, I'd say, experience to some of what we've been discussing, and I've really appreciated the conversation that has been had the last 24 hours and 48 hours. I think it's really important. So I'm happy to share more specifically about something, if there's a specific question someone has, or just to kind of talk about some of the ethics and victim rights overall. So.
Involved in law enforcement advocacy, and also, forgive me, I have been busy and not followed along with a lot of the conversations the past few days. Mm-hmm. Where is the issues that that you've mostly appreciated, or that have been brought to light that maybe you thought would be of benefit?
Absolutely. So, specifically speaking, I know in terms of the Delphi investigation, the podcast, the Murder Sheet podcast, had obtained some documents that I know have been circulating outside of Murder Sheet as well, that were related to the investigation, and they seem to have been inadvertently made public. The judge very quickly filed to have them removed from the public CCS feed, but the cat was out of the bag. So when I heard that they were planning on releasing those documents, I had some concerns about the content. I imagined it was quite graphic in terms of, detailing interrogations. They're not exactly like you see on television, but they're very similar. There's a lot of explicit and details that are often shared inside of those rooms, and there's a reason that those documents are protected very heavily. And it's not, often until a case is playing out within the confines of a courtroom that information is shared. And even then, a lot of times only jurors are privy to, some of the most difficult details. So definitely had some ethical, but also just in terms of victim protection and traumatization, not only to the victims involved, but also just the larger community. I expressed some concerns I had about that. And I think I see a hand here. Is it okay if I?
Yes.
Okay.
That would be great, because I think I've invited everyone like 4 times now, because
sure.
I'm just, go ahead.
Okay.
I'll just say, I guess while we're waiting, I'm not sure who raised their hand. Oh, I see there. I've attempted Disco Super. I've attempted to permit you to speak. I'll try again. Looks like you're raising your hand to ask a question or something. Let's see. Oh, there you are. Okay, I'll shut up. Yeah, this is not the most friendly interface. I can't really tell who's active and who's not. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Can people hear me now? Is it the case that I have to have my microphone on in order to hear? It's very bizarre.
I can hear you, Disco Superfly.
Okay, great.
I've been able to mute, and now I can hear you fine. And I think I've been able to mute and still hear. So,
okay, all right. Well, my question is pretty general, I guess. I was just wondering if you could kind of share like what the ethical concerns are for like the various kind of stakeholders. Like, you know, on one hand, like there are the victims and there's the victims' families and there's kind of like the public at large, and, you know, like what sort of harm does this create? And do you have any thoughts on like the harm perpetuated just by like, I guess, people like viewing this content repeatedly and people who, you know, had nothing to do with like the dissemination, but now they're able to look at it and, you know, generating conversation or anything like that?
That's an excellent question. And I think what really comes to mind for me is privacy. Privacy and dignity are really the two like most pressing concerns that we think of when working in this sphere, whether it's law enforcement, criminal investigation, or just, you know, victim advocacy as a whole. So when we think of privacy, we think of it in terms of, you know, protecting victims from exploitation and additional trauma, providing, you know, basic information to them about interacting with the media, really inviting them to participate as much as possible, as much as they feel comfortable doing, because, you know, one of the things that's important, we want them to understand their right to privacy, because a lot of times victims are not, you know, no one has explained to them what rights they do have. And then in terms of dignity, like the biggest issue that I see is that victims in general have been robbed of their choice. So when it comes to disseminating sensitive information related to their specific trauma, we really want to include them as much as possible. So that would mean reaching out to them ahead of time and explaining to them, you know, what our intentions are, what information we have. I mean, just the fact that, you know, a podcaster, the public, had access to this document before the parents of Libby and Abby, and even the parents of the children involved in general, that, you know, on its face is egregious. That should not have happened. So really notifying the victims and the victim families. And I use victim and survivor in the law enforcement field. Unfortunately, it's not, you know, the fuzziest language, so I do use those terms interchangeably, but I invite, you know, conversations surrounding that as well. And then in terms of just vicarious trauma, you know, the community as a whole, if they were not prepared for the contents of those documents, which means, you know, most of us are not exposed to this type of gratuitous traumatizing information on a day-to-day basis. Individuals such as myself, you know, law enforcement investigators, forensic interviewers, individuals like that have specific training and specific support in place to kind of buffer the psychological and emotional impacts that this kind of, you know, this type of case and the details of this particular crime, it's just not information that the general public really needs to have. You know, we're not privy to it. These are private lives and private individuals who have been subjected to horrific abuse. And so one of the things that I've kind of honed in on is that just because you might have a legal right to do something, that does not mean that it is the ethical or appropriate course of action, especially when we're dealing with an open investigation. So yeah, lots of concerns. I hope that answered your question in part, but I'm happy to circle back to anything I missed.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You're very articulate. And I have to say that I've got a lot of mixed feelings about this. Of course, I think I'm bothered by the idea of the prurient interest being fed, and that even that some people would enjoy this content. I feel like while I had to, my curiosity was there, but I also have experienced, you know, like where you said, vicarious trauma, and a lot of sorrow. And but I knew that would be what I'm signed up for with that, and to actually, just like looking at images from the Ukraine war, I feel like I have to not turn away. But I also am very offended that the documents were released. I don't mind the discussions, but I don't like the documents were released.
Yeah, I think that's a point that I'm not sure if that came across in the original post I made, but it's not so much the discussion of the relevant details that we all have kind of the public has an interest in this case, especially the individuals on this forum. But there's a very dangerous line, I think, between information relevant to this case and information not relevant nor necessary nor helpful. So I definitely think that I can certainly, I empathize with the need and want for details and information, and I think the discussion is important. It's just that the sensitive case documents that should never have been in the hands of the public, at least not at this juncture, is really where I took issue and continue to feel that the wrong decision was made.
Yeah, it's really too bad. And like you said, even though you can, doesn't mean you should. I haven't followed the legal discussion too closely, but I guess legally, it's out there now. You can't really get it back. But even if it wasn't illegal for it to get released or to be posted on Reddit. That was a question, I think.
Yeah, and I'm not going to speak to that. I don't think that I'm really qualified to do so. What I will say is that releasing the docs, whether or not we agreed with that decision, is one thing, but there were multiple steps that should have been taken before that even occurred, and it felt very rushed. And the fact that the podcast mentioned that the agency that they had reached out to specifically was the National Children's Alliance. And so I actually work with the National Children's Alliance and with, child advocacy centers. And one thing I will tell you is that if they did in fact reach out to that agency, and if they did in fact share with them what they were intending to do, I'm certain that the feedback they got, I'm not going to, assume anything, but the number one rule or guideline that we go by in messaging in the media is never discuss an ongoing investigation, period. So I find it very hard to believe that the feedback that they received and the steps that they took were in line. And I'm not to say that did not happen, but I really do think there were some missteps that occurred, and that's really unfortunate.
This is a tough one, so feel free to pass. If sorry, I didn't raise my hand.
It's okay.
Okay. If we could wind back time and they could have done, this, not what they did, but done something ethical, about what does that look like? What does kind of respectful discussion look like besides this forum? If they had wanted to do it, maybe commenting in some fashion on what they saw in a way that would have respected the victims. Would there have been a way to do that? Would you have, do you have lessons for them, kind of, I guess?
It is a great question. And yes, there are a number of things that I probably would have done. The very first thing is that I would have contacted the family. If this was something I felt I absolutely needed to do, we know that they're generally receptive, especially consider, with a matter this important and this publicized. I'm certain that they would have been receptive to at least communicating. So being preemptive and contacting the family first, and not just notifying them that this is something they were going to do, but really getting their feedback and their input and asking the family, how should we do this if that's something that they wanted them to do, and what steps can we take, and what do you feel comfortable with, and inviting the family to participate, because really victim participation is of utmost importance whether you're prosecuting a case or investigating a case or, communicating with the media, the public, on the whole, it is really important to include the victims and the families and survivors every step of the way. And so that should have been the very first thing. They mentioned that they reached out to the prosecutor's office. They didn't specify which prosecutor. This case occurred in Miami County, but Carroll County is the jurisdiction of Delphi and ISP. So, there's a lot of questions that I think could definitely be answered. And mentioning that, they had reached out, they didn't hear anything back, and then they chose after a week or so to move forward and release the document. I would not have done that. I would have continued to reach out if it was something that I felt, I needed to be released, and I would have waited. That's probably what I would have done. And then at the very least, redacting names and identifiers is not enough. There's something called jigsaw identification, and I know everyone on Reddit and these boards probably can infer what that means. You don't really need specifiers and very specific information to put the pieces together and identify a person or persons or location. And even a neighborhood, mentioning a specific neighborhood can be very stigmatizing for the people within that neighborhood. So victim does not just mean individual. It doesn't just mean family. It can very much mean a community that might already be traumatized and marginalized. So there were multiple things that could have and should have been done before this was released.
What's bothering me now is this perception and feeling that the community almost thinks they have a right, or that they have, it's kind of like our information. I'm including myself in that. Like, I'm just almost taking it for granted that this is all just out there, and I kind of wish I could unread or unhear some things, but then I also, because of my involvement in this sub, kind of felt like I needed to check it out. Just like there's some topics that I would rather not see on DelphiDocs, like POI related stuff. All of it, really, I'd rather not. But it's actually kind of part of the story now. And that's not the specific stuff we're talking about, the CSAM material and victim information. I'm generalizing here, just on the feelings that I've had over the past week as I've contemplated this.
I think that's a really important point, and it kind of ties back to one of the concerns I had very, very early on when I heard of this, which is I don't think that the community on the whole really needs to read this. There's no reason for it. It is traumatic. It is the worst of human depravity, and like I said, there is a reason that these documents are so heavily protected, and the singular reason that these are out there is because a clerical error was made, and there's a lot of chatter and conspiracy surrounding whether or not that was intentional. I could be wrong. I find it very, very hard to believe that would ever be an intentional leak, just because of the magnitude of the harm that this has and will continue to cause for every single person who was named in that document. Redacted or not, it's out there. The unredacted one, it's out there. We know this. And whether or not they're associated with a crime, if their name is in that, if their street name is in it, if they're even implied, their life and their reputation has changed, and it's unfortunate that had to happen. And we do have this entitlement issue, I think, as true crime consumers and people that are emotionally invested in this case with really pure and good and positive intentions for justice and for seeing resolution and for aiding in that however we can. This is not the way to do it by any means. So I just want to encourage anyone who did read the documents. You could be experiencing some kind of, after effects of that. There's, like I said, these are details of crimes that are abhorrent, and they are not meant for the community to hear and read and see and imagine. So if you are experiencing a lot of emotion, anxiety, it's traumatic. You could very well be experiencing your own trauma response to even reading this. So I encourage you to reach out to your own support if you have that available, and if not, to seek it out. You can reach out to me if you don't know where else to go. But I definitely want to encourage everyone to please take care of yourselves, because this is not just, a crime that is a story that we're hearing. These are lives, and these are people that have been irreparably harmed by this person. Whether or not related directly to the Delphi case has yet to be seen, but this is an individual and individuals who have caused irreparable, just immense pain and damage to so many people that we don't even know a fraction of it. So yeah, please just take care of yourselves, whatever that looks like.
How should the Reddit community, or say just me as a person, respond in the future should this come about? Either by communicating with people who are putting this out there, or do you have any suggestion of how to approach it in the future to kind of knock it down?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think one of the antidotes, to kind of this vitriol that we see with really highly emotionally charged, developments like this, is to remind ourselves that these are real people, both involved in the case, but also that we are interacting with on these boards. These are real people who have real investment in this case. If at any point something just feels off in your gut, ask questions, right? Don't make assumptions. It is okay to ask questions. It is okay to be curious and to be inquisitive, but to remember that kindness and the benefit of the doubt are important, and to show up. None of us are an expert in everything, even the things that we know a lot about, right? I am not an expert in terms of, there's always things that I am learning, and even in a field like victim advocacy and mental health, I'm a clinician, but I am constantly learning about trauma and how trauma affects individuals, right? So we can't anticipate how a person is going to respond to a particular type of trauma. So being kind and being open and asking questions instead of making assumptions is kind of what I would say. I don't know. I don't think one person really bears the responsibility in terms of this subreddit or this community, but I do think that showing up and asking questions instead of making assumptions, and really, we're the image of the devil and angel on your shoulder. On one hand, we really just want the details. We are famished for information about this case that has been on our minds for 5+ years now. But on the other hand, if it feels dirty, if it feels unethical, if it feels shady, there's probably something to that. So lean into that feeling, ask yourself those questions, and ask other people. Does anyone else think this is wrong? Is this okay? It's okay to ask when in doubt. I hope that answers your question.
Oh, that's great. That's great advocacy, and it's good encouragement, and to be reminded that it's okay to question. And I also just realized that I was trying to figure out earlier why I was feeling so triggered about just personal stuff, and it makes sense now that my issues are different, but I've just been kind of very emotional, melancholic, and also easily triggered about some past issues. And I was wondering why it came up, and it makes sense in a kind of a weird way, because I've kind of peered into and considered the suffering and of the folks that are victims and survivors in this case.
And I really appreciate you saying that. And it to me, that does not in any way sound silly. If anything, that sounds completely understandable. And it's one of the main kind of concerns that I had at the beginning. When we think of triggers are things that, they bring back painful memories. So and I want to, for a second, just kind of differentiate between like a trigger and a re-traumatization. So a trigger could be, like an unconscious or conscious reminder, right? It makes us kind of feel, I'm trying to think of an example. So let's say a person has a beard, right? And you see that person's beard and it triggers a memory. That would be a trigger. Whereas a re-traumatization is way more powerful than that. It's something that it's a reminder or something that causes us to kind of re-experience those feelings very vividly and very comprehensively. And it's almost as if that past trauma is reoccurring in the present moment. And that is a very real thing. It happens subconsciously. We're not even aware of it a lot of the time. And that's often when we're left with these like bubbling up of past experiences or issues that we've, dealt with. So we thought, all kinds of things, whether or not it's CSAM related or just your own, individual trauma. It would not at all surprise me if you are not the only one to kind of feel that way. I can tell you, even in my work, I've been doing this for years and years, and I still find myself feeling triggered. And vicarious trauma is real. It's that secondary trauma that people in the field often deal with, and it's important to take care of yourself and to lean on one another and to talk about these things and to remember to have compassion for one another, because we all, this is triggering, right? This was traumatizing for all of us. So I think it's important to keep that lens when communicating with one another, even online, even with strangers.
Thanks for that. Have you been in how long have you been on Reddit, and are you just following Delphi, or are you following other stuff?
Yeah, so I've been on Reddit for probably like 3 years, I'd say. So I've been following the Delphi case since late 2017, I'd say, but really did not become emotionally invested as I have become until I did find the boards on Reddit and the community here. And I've had to take time away, as I'm sure many of us have, when it's become too heavy or too difficult. But I'd say this is probably the community I feel most connected to, probably the most active one. Definitely one I've participate in as I can, but again, there have been times where I've had to take some significant time away just because this is really heavy stuff. These are real lives that have been destroyed. So trying to kind of keep that perspective, it can be pretty heavy. I'm not sure how to. I don't see any hands raised, so if someone's raising a hand, I promise I'm not intentionally overlooking you, but I appreciate everyone for listening and for showing up. And if there are more questions, you can always send me a message if you feel more comfortable doing that.
Yeah, I was just thinking that seems like folks are here just to listen for the most part, and I kind of keep stepping in just because, well, I have a lot of, I'd like to ask these questions, but to just keep, engaging you, because once you start talking, a lot of good information, and just really, it's reassuring to hear the thoughtfulness and to really, I feel like it's making up for some of the grossness to be respectful and mature and just spend this time doing that.
I really do appreciate that. And one of the things I want to make sure that I do, on my end is to circle back to Disco Superfly's wonderful question earlier about what I would have, maybe done differently or, changed. I absolutely would have spent much more time discussing resources for the community that we know, the large community that by now has heard the podcast and read the documents. I absolutely would have spent a lot of time providing information and resources of support, ways that individuals can get involved outside of Reddit, whether that's, to seek out individual support that they may need. There's no shame in that. We all need help and we all need support, especially when we're dealing with heavy topics like this. Or if you feel called and compelled to do something, there are things that are much more productive and helpful to real victims of crimes and to pursuing justice than what we've seen this past few days. So I will leave it at that. But I am going to provide some resources and some information on this page, if that's okay, just to make sure that we are leaving people better than we find them, and not kind of dropping this grenade or, kind of vomiting into the lap of the community and saying, okay, I feel so much better, I got that out, and then just leaving the community with vomit in their lap, not really knowing what to do with it. So we really don't want to do that, and we want to avoid that harm, however, and as much as possible. And there's some really good guides for journalists, media, social media, whether you are a journalist in official capacity or an indie journalist or someone that just is really passionate posting on social media. There's a lot of really helpful guides that I wish more people would consider before they post. So, there's the Dart Center for Journalism and Trauma is a really good one. There's the Ethical Journalism Network, the National Children's Alliance. I've worked with them, I'm involved with them, but I might suggest some more directly relevant sources in terms of trauma and the larger community. So I can definitely share some more things I think would be helpful. The Department of Justice has a ton of really helpful information for victims of crimes, but also just for the larger community in terms of supporting them. The Violence Against Women Act and the Victims of Crime Act are two huge government initiatives, bills that were passed that are now grants that fund. I know National Children's Alliance receives a lot of support from those. So all of that to say, there's a lot of information out there, more than I could possibly provide. So I will share as much as I can for everybody.
That's fantastic. I appreciate that. That's a great idea and a great balance to the content that's out there. Anybody have any questions, comments, deep thoughts, shower thoughts? Coming up on an hour. It did take us a while to get in here, but I think I don't know, maybe it was 7:10 or so.
I just want to thank you and the mods for creating this community. I think it's really important to be cautious and to be ethical and to be responsible with the information that we're putting out there and with the conversations that we're having, even on a site such as Reddit, where, not to censor speech, but just to to ensure that the conversations that we're having are productive and at least, if nothing else, are not perpetuating harm. So I really do appreciate this forum and this opportunity to speak a little bit on some of the events of the week. It's been kind of a bit of a tumultuous time for people who are emotionally invested in this case, certainly for the people closely connected and the families, but even just the larger community as a whole. So again, it would be very normal if some of us were experiencing some vicarious trauma or feeling especially triggered for whatever reason. So again, please just be kind and take care of yourselves and seek out support if you think that would be helpful, because there are probably a lot more people than you realize who are feeling the same way.
Okay, well, if no one else has any questions, then I think we can call it. I think this should have been recorded. I don't know for sure. I don't know if I had to initiate that. There wasn't anywhere to do it. So we're learning as we go. Thanks for that. I saw a heart pop up down there. Thank you for that. So I'm going to leave. I don't know. I guess everybody else will just have to leave on their own and the room will stay here. Or, everybody have a great evening. Look forward to seeing you on the forum.
Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Amazeballs. Thank you so much. Good night.